Everyone says, start investing early. Cool, thanks, super helpful, right up there with drink more water and get 8 hours of sleep. But nobody actually shows you what early looks like with real math on a real chart, growing in real time. So here are three people, same job, same salary, same $500 a month going into the same index fund. The only difference, one started at 25, one at 35, and one at 45. Watch what happens to their money, because the gap at the end will haunt you. Let's start the clock. Here's the setup. All three of our investors put $500 every single month into an S&P 500 index fund. That's the big, boring index that tracks the 500 largest American companies. Its historical average annual return since 1926 is 10.41%. We'll round down to 10 for clean math. The 25-year-old invests for 40 years, all the way to retirement at 65. Total money they actually put in out of their own pocket, $240,000. The 35-year-old gets 30 years, puts in $180,000. The 45-year-old gets 20 years, puts in $120,000. Now here's the thing I want you to notice. Look at those contribution totals. The difference between the 25-year-old and the 35-year-old, the entire gap in what they physically deposited, is just $60,000. That's $500 a month times 120 months. Not nothing, but not exactly a fortune either. You could buy a mid-range Tesla with that money. Remember that number. 60,000, because what comes out the other end of this equation is going to make you physically uncomfortable. Now let's see what compound interest does to these three numbers. The clock starts. The 25-year-old begins at age 25, the 35-year-old at 35, and the 45-year-old at 45. Three starting lines, three different moments. And for the first few years? Honestly, it's boring. The lines crawl upward at almost the same angle. Compound interest is technically working, but it's like watching grass grow. Most of the account balance is just the money they personally put in. The market returns are a rounding error on top. After 10 years, the 25-year-old, who's now 35, by the way, has about $102,000. Sounds decent, right? But they put in $60,000 of that themselves. The market only added $42,000 in a whole decade. That's a nice bonus, sure, but it's not the kind of number that makes you rethink your life. Now stop. Pause the simulation. Look at these three lines at their respective 10-year marks. Can you even tell them apart? They're practically the same. The gaps are tiny, almost invisible. If you put your thumb over the labels, you couldn't tell which line belongs to which person. If you stop the experiment right here, you'd walk away thinking starting early doesn't really matter. You'd say, see, 10 years of head start and it barely made a difference. I've got time. Keep watching. Because here's where the math gets violent. Now we hit year 20, and something changes in the chart that you can actually see. The 25-year-old's line. It's not going straight anymore. It's bending, curving upward like a hockey stick. And right around year 20, something remarkable crosses over. Their investment earnings, the money the market generated, officially passed the total amount they personally put in. Think about that for a second. After 20 years, the 25-year-old's money is now making more money than they are. Every single month, compound interest is dumping more into their account than that $500 paycheck deduction. They've created a second employee that works 24/7s, never takes vacation, and gets a raise every year. Meanwhile, the 35-year-old just hit their 10-year mark, sitting around $102,000. Same place the 25-year-old was a decade ago. And the 45-year-old? They just started 5 years back. They've barely put together $39,000. Their line is basically flat. The fork has begun. You can see it now. The blue line is pulling away, and the gap is about to explode. And the next 10 years? This is where it gets genuinely unfair. Year 30. This is where the chart starts to feel personally offensive. The 25-year-old, now 55 years old, sitting at a desk somewhere, probably complaining about their back, has $1,130,000 from $500 a month. They've already crossed the $1 million line with a full decade still ahead of them. 10 years. At this altitude, those last 10 years are going to be the most powerful of all. The 35-year-old sits at $380,000. Solid. Respectable. Most people would be happy with that. But now look at the gap between them on the chart. Really look at it. Here's the number that should keep you up at night. The 25-year-old only put in $60,000 more than the 35-year-old. $60,000. That's $500 a month for 10 extra years. That's a used Honda Civic per year. That's skipping one nice dinner a week. But the difference in their final accounts? $2 million. $60,000 in, $2 million out. That is a 34-to-1 return on the act of simply starting earlier. That's not investing genius. That's just a calendar. And here's the kicker. If the 35-year-old wanted to catch up, to reach the same number as the 25-year-old by 65, they would need to invest $1,400 every single month for 30 years straight. That's 2.8 times more money every month for 3 decades, because they waited 1 decade. But we're not done. Let's see the final number. The finish line. Age 65 retirement day. All three investors open their statements. The 25-year-old, $3,162,000. The 35-year-old, $1,130,000. The 45-year-old, $379,000. Same monthly payment, same investment, same index fund, same market. The only variable was when they started. And here's the detail that absolutely broke my brain when I ran these numbers. The 25-year-old's growth in just the last 10 years, from age 55 to 65, added more money than the 45-year-old's entire 20-year investment produced. One person's final chapter generated more wealth than another person's entire investing career. That's compound interest at full speed. It's not linear growth. It's exponential, and it is brutally mathematically unfair. Now, I know what you're thinking, sure, but what if I pick the worst possible time to start? What if I invest right before a crash? Great question. Let's test it. Imagine you're the unluckiest investor who ever lived. You walk into a bank in September 1929, set up an automatic $500 monthly investment into the stock market, and you feel great about yourself. 1 month later, the market crashes. The Great Depression begins, the worst financial disaster in modern history. Stocks drop almost 90%. Banks fail, breadlines stretch around the block. Your portfolio gets absolutely obliterated. But, and this is important, you don't stop. You keep putting in your $500 every single month, through the depression, through the panic, through years where opening your account statement felt like reading a horror novel. 20 years later, you check your balance, and you're in the green, positive returns. After starting at literally the worst moment in market history. And here's the thing, that's not just one lucky exception. This is the statistical rule. The S&P 500 has never, not once in 100 years of data, delivered a negative return over any 20-year rolling period. Not through the Great Depression, not through World War I, not through Vietnam, not through the dot-com bubble popping, not through the 2008 financial crisis. Never. 0 times out of hundreds of 20-year windows. Every single one came out positive. There is no bad time to start investing. There is only not starting. So the real question was never when is the right time. It was always will you start at all. Now I already know the 2 objections forming in your head. Number 1, I don't have $500 a month. I'm 27 and I can barely cover rent. Totally fair. So let's rerun everything with $100 a month instead. The 25-year-old ends up with $632,000. The 35-year-old, $226,000. The 45-year-old, $76,000. The absolute numbers are smaller, but the ratios are identical. The gap is identical. The lesson is identical. It was never about the amount. It was always about when you started the clock. Number 2, past returns don't guarantee future results. Also fair. So let's use a brutally conservative 6% annual return instead of 10. That's well below the historical average, even after adjusting for inflation. At 6%, the 25-year-old still ends up with just under $1 million. The 45-year-old, $231,000. The gap shrinks in raw dollars, but the ratio barely budges. Time still wins. Every time. The math doesn't care how old you are. It doesn't care about your salary, your job title, or your investing knowledge. It only cares about one thing when you start. If this changed how you think about your money, hit subscribe. Next week, we're putting the S&P 500 against bonds with 30 years of real data. Same chart, same math. Very different ending. You're going to want to see that one.